Hey guys, my name is Tony Collier, and this is my awesome husband,
Sam Collier.
Listen, we hope that you enjoyed session 1. We're so super excited because we are getting ready to hop into session 2 as we dive into nixing the negative things.
Wow.
But just for a moment, we need to ask Shanti to tell us a little bit about this session so we can prepare our hearts.
Yes, because it turns out we actually have a lot more unkindness and negativity that comes out of us every day that we don't even realize is there. Wow. It's impacting our marriages every day.
Yeah.
So it's learning a whole new habit.
Oh, goodness. Well, we're so super excited about it. We're so glad that you're on this journey. We're going to hop right into it right now.
So welcome back. Last session, we talked about why kindness matters and the fact that we can so often be unkind without realizing it. This session, we're going to tackle what specifically that looks like, how we might be negative or unkind to our spouse without intending to be, and what we can do differently. One of the most sneaky and damaging ways that we spread negativity and unkindness, make our spouse feel very uncared for, and reinforce bad thoughts and feelings in ourselves is by venting about our spouse when we're upset. When we do, there's a change that happens, and it's not the one we're looking for. I think of myself as a fairly positive person, and yet I can gripe about something in politics or a frustrating colleague or what my kids didn't do right with the best of them. And that includes me griping about Jeff, my husband, without ever really realizing it. And I don't account for the fact that every time I do that, every time I share that frustration or anger with others, I'm reinforcing negativity in myself. Not just negative words, but negative thoughts and feelings. After all, think about it. If you're irritated with your spouse and you tell them that you're irritated and you tell somebody else that you're irritated, are you going to be more or less irritated? The answer is obvious. And yet, if you're irritated, but you refuse to focus on those frustrating things or talk about them, and instead find something positive to sincerely praise or affirm about your spouse, and you tell them that, and you tell somebody else that, are you going to be more or less irritated? Also obvious. We tend to think that because we feel a certain way, that's how we talk and act. But the way God wired us, it works in reverse just as much. So often our feelings follow our words and our actions, not the other way around. In other words, there is a great benefit in choosing to hold back negativity. We'll have far less frustration and more enjoyment, and the relationship will be happier. After all, each one of us tends to care about the people in our lives, especially those closest to us. We want to be a blessing to them. God tells us in that famous verse from 1 Corinthians 13:4, love is patient, love is kind, it does not envy, it does not boast, it is not proud. And we want to learn to be kind in that way, right? Which is why it all starts here.
Listen, guys, this week is all about nixing the negativity. And what Shanti kind of explains is that there are some aspects of negativity that we may not know is negative. There's some things that we do in our marriage that's like, oh, that's, whatever. I grew up with that. That happened with me, but I didn't know that that was actually negative. And so I want to read a couple examples for you of just some of those things that you may not think is negative, but she actually says is. Here's one of them. This idea that, this will be hard. Anytime a spouse kind of brings up, hey, we got to change some things. We got to do, it's just going to be hard. That kind of thing, right? Or, exasperation, right? It's just always when we go through different things, you're just, oh, why did you do that again? Or the irritation, pointing out mistakes, complaining, bitterness. I think we all know about that. Okay. Here's a big one. Suspicion. Or this is the last one, probably the biggest one. Catastrophizing. Did I say that right?
I love that you said that well.
Catastrophizing. So everything's a disaster. And the last one, guys, is sarcasm.
Oh. Which
just happens to be mine.
Yeah.
Right? Because, you grow up, you grow up joking, doing other things. And, I didn't even realize I didn't even realize it for so long that, it was my subtle way of getting vengeance. I'll jab you a little bit until I realize, wait a minute.
Yeah.
That's negative. What would you guys, which one is yours? I mean, out of all of those.
I could pick 3 or 4 of them off the bat, but I think the number one would be sarcasm too. Because I also grew up with that we would joke about things, and that's how you would kind of cover up things, is by joking about it. And frankly, it's funny. I mean, it is funny.
It is funny.
And it may be funny to us,
Right.
but we don't live in a sitcom.
It may be funny to us, but we don't live in a sitcom.
Tweet.
I mean, because that is like a sitcom. They're firing off great zingers, and they are funny. The audience laughs, but in real life, that's hurtful.
Yeah.
And I've been so guilty of that.
Vicki, what about you? Rick, come on.
For me, I'm a teacher. So problem is that I will sound like a teacher at home. So when I start to get exasperated, I start to point out mistakes. Sweetie, can we just put this right here? Those sorts of things. And I realized after he finally just said, this makes me feel like a child. I feel like I have not a wife, but I have my teacher, and she's being my mother, and she's telling me how to do things. So I'm sorry, I do that all day, but I can't do that when I go home. And releasing that's one of the things that needs to, and the kindness thing would just be so wonderful.
Yeah.
So, in what ways do you need to hold back negativity as the first element of kindness? As I mentioned last time, I would have sworn I wasn't someone who had to worry much about negativity itself until I began cataloging all the different types. As you may have seen, the negativity chapter in the book will help you identify which of those 7 types of negativity and unkindness most apply to you. But just as a review, let's cover 3 of the common ones: exasperation, irritation, or pointing out mistakes, sarcasm, or grumbling. As noted last time, exasperation is one of my biggies. I get exasperated with my kids all too often. My son forgets to turn in his big science homework, and I go, "Buddy, what happened again?" Originally, I was thinking this was primarily an issue if I did it with the kids, but in the research, it was the same effect if we get obviously irritated or point out someone's mistakes to make sure someone knows they made one, or to try to get them to take something seriously next time. Or maybe I get frustrated with my husband because I feel like he takes a little too long to get to the point, or he's moving too slow on something. So he's starting to explain how such and such works, and I think I know where he's going with it, so I jump the gun to move things along. Yeah, not pretty, but I do this. Many of us do. And we don't realize that we're saying, "You're an idiot." We would never say that out loud, but that's what we're saying. We are so unkind, and we need to stop it. Here's the second pattern of negativity and unkindness: sarcasm. Now, some of you are wincing right now because you feel I'm looking right at you, right? Not long ago, I was doing a pastoral interview on this topic at one big megachurch and mentioned that one of the patterns of negativity was sarcasm. And the pastor was like, "But sarcasm is my spiritual gift." Here's the thing. We all love joking around. There's nothing wrong with that. If all the people in the room know that there is 100% unconditional goodwill between you and your spouse or whomever you're being sarcastic with, then it's just fun. But if there's any question, then your spouse may laugh, but on the inside, they may be thinking, "Do they mean that?" And it plants a seed of doubt. So they start to build a wall to protect themselves. And as the sarcasm continues, they may build it higher. And we found that even if there is 100% goodwill, if sarcasm happens too much, then it starts to create that doubt, even if it wasn't there to begin with. The point is, if you tend to engage in sarcasm, eliminate it for 30 days. It may be a lot harder than you think because you didn't realize you did it so much. But then watch what happens, and the greater trust and intimacy that happens in your marriage as those walls start to come down. When the 30 days are over, you may realize you need to, and want to, cut back sarcasm to a much lower level permanently. The third type of negativity I want to review is grumbling, complaining, venting, dissatisfaction. "Honey, that isn't the way you do that. Why doesn't my wife do this? I cannot believe he did that again." We go from grumbling on the inside to venting on the outside, and we don't realize how unkind we become in the process. That's one reason God tells us in James 5:9, do not grumble against one another. He wants us to learn to be kind, not the opposite. In order to deal with this, some of us have to confront an idea that we've bought into, a notion that venting our dissatisfaction may not always be a bad thing. After all, we think if you're getting more and more upset, it's like that pot on the stove that starts boiling. If you don't let off a little of the steam, you'll just explode eventually, right? We've actually come to believe that getting stuff off our chest is healthy, and yet it turns out that that is totally inaccurate neurologically. Now, don't get me wrong. That doesn't mean we can't address things that matter or be able to talk about things with a close, encouraging friend with whom you can be totally honest and vulnerable. It's important for us to be able to seek that kind of counsel, but that is different from venting just to get something off your chest, because it turns out it doesn't get it off our chest at all. Several researchers have identified it just screws it down in there more deeply. One is Dr. Brad Bushman at Ohio State. His research has found that when you keep expressing anger or frustration, it actually further activates your emotional anger. It's more like venting doesn't let off steam, it turns up the heat. What works instead, he found, is to take a deep breath and not keep expressing that dissatisfaction. That's like taking the pot off the stove and putting the lid on. It smothers the anger and puts out the fire. That's primarily an anger analogy, but it works very similarly with any dissatisfaction, and holding that negativity back has great benefits. I encourage you to look at the 7 different patterns of negativity and unkindness in some detail and consider whether you see yourself in any of them, especially if you're starting the 30-Day Kindness Challenge tomorrow. Only once you know your type of negativity will you be able to see it when it happens and work on cutting it off. Just to be clear, this does not mean that we can't address real issues in our marriage, but starting tomorrow, during the 30-Day Kindness Challenge, we will handle it differently for just 1 month. We're going to practice not being impatient, not envying, not boasting, not being proud. And as we learn how to avoid reflexively expressing the negative, we'll also learn a skill that will help us address real and necessary issues in a purposely constructive and kind way, long after the 30 days are over. We'll learn how to talk about concerns in a way that brings light into the darkness rather than darkness into darkness, which isn't going to transform anything. So start by asking God to open your eyes to the ways you've been unkind so you can bring that light into your marriage. And if you haven't yet, sign up to start the 30-Day Kindness Challenge tomorrow or whenever your group is starting at jointhekindnesschallenge.com/marriedpeople. You'll get the first of the daily reminder emails tomorrow with tips and hints, and start a month where you will see some great things happen. Thanks for jumping in.
So my question to you guys would be, how can we bring up issues to our spouse in our marriage without being negative? What ways do you think?
I try to flip it. If there's something I want to talk to him about and I don't want to come at it from the negative, then I try to come at it from the positive. But really, for 30 days, I can let anything. I can table something for 30 days. Not that I'm going to let it mound up, but honestly, with all the stuff we're going to be doing, it might be a little easier to bring it up because it might not matter so much anymore.
I think really, though, that after you've been so kind for 30 days, like you said, it'll just be, I don't think those things really won't matter as much. And in truth, a lot of the things that really upset us, or that they complain about, or that get us exasperated, really don't matter in the big scheme of things.
Our old pastor told us to view the person the same way that God views them. So that really helps us to kind of look at this person in a more beautiful way and not focus on the things that are imperfect about them, but to focus on the things that we love and cherish about this person. So doing that as often as we can really helps to just allow us to be the best that we can to each other and be the kindest and the most intentional to each other.